At this press conference, we have 3 of today's participants from the Child Rights Plenary, and they will share more of their knowledge on this topic and answer whatever questions there may be. So, a very warm welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
And I have the pleasure to introduce Sabine Rakotomalala from the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, where you are a technical advisor, I understand. Masimba Kuchera from the United Church of Christ in Zimbabwe, and also a member of the WCC Commission of Churches on International Affairs. And finally, Caterina Tino, who is a partnership specialist at the UNICEF. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Also ready to assist with facts and other information are Frederique Seidel, who is a WCC Special Advisor on Child Rights. Right here. So let us start with a short introduction from each one of you on child rights, from your perspective, and then move on to the questions and answers. So I would like to ask Masimba to start.
Thank you very much. Greetings to all of you. The Commission of Churches on International Affairs in 2015 started on this journey to at least have child-friendly churches. Now that was from the 2013 encouragement from the ecumenical conversation on children that happened in Busan. Busan is where the World Council 10th General Assembly happened. Now the Commission, in its internal workings, has 5 working groups. I'll concentrate on Group 2, which I moderate, which is on human rights, children's rights, women's rights, and freedom of religion. So the child rights issue is an issue that concerns the Commission, and we then decided in partnership with UNICEF to develop the principles and tools for child-friendly churches, with the hope that churches can take these principles and tools, adapt them to their own contexts, adopt them into their own function, and have them being used not only by clergy, but also by the lay people who look after children.
Thank you. Caterina, would you like to continue?
Yes, I would like first to say a couple of words in general about UNICEF and its work with religious organizations. The potential, the key role played by religious communities in assuring the well-being of children has long been recognized by UNICEF. It is a very key priority to our work. There are countless examples of how influential faith communities can be. Just think recently of the role played by religious leaders in the fight against Ebola, for example, just to name one. So this prioritization of partnerships with religious communities is reflected in the work of my team, my unit. I come from New York, from the Civil Society Partnerships Unit, and as I was saying, the recognition of the key role played by religious community is really reflected in the importance that we attach to this kind of work and how much we have invested in this area. So, having said that, the World Council of Churches, with its with such a broad network, such an extended network and outreach in virtually almost all the countries of the world, seemed really like a very natural ally for UNICEF. We have started this partnership about a couple of years ago, and it has been a long journey, but a very fruitful one. A journey that we did together in every step, and that led to the development today of these principles for child-friendly churches, which we think really will have the potential of changing the lives of children through activities, through a set of behaviors simple interventions that everyone in the church at every level can really take on board, without the need of too much support, without the need of too much funding or training or anything. Those things are important, but there are also a set of very simple things that really everyone in the church, from lay people to clergy, can do very simply, starting from now.
A very important partnership indeed. Also, there are more important players, especially when it comes to end violence against children, where there's a global partnership. Sabine, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, violence against children is one of the three principles that the World Council of Churches is working on. And just to give you some quick figures, 1 out of 2 children in the world today is victim of physical, sexual, or psychological violence in their lifetime. 1 out of 4 children suffers from physical abuse, which is hitting, kicking, torture, severe physical abuse. And nearly 1 out of 5 girls is sexually abused at least once in her lifetime. So the figures are horrific. But time to look at the solutions. We realized that people used to think that's just the way it is. Violence is part of our life. But today experts show and agree that there are proven solutions to work and that can prevent violence against children in high-income countries, in low-income countries, in homes, in schools, and in communities. So that's why the Global Partnership to End Violence was set up, along with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the point of the Global Partnership is to bring together key actors: UNICEF, World Council of Churches, High Commissioner for Refugees, governments, academics, donors, really bringing everybody together at the table at country level to end violence against children in 192 countries. The partnership will do it through 3 objectives: building political will, so really persuading governments of the importance of this as an issue. Secondly, accelerating action, so making sure that change is happening in terms of programming, that interventions are being funded, and that we see reductions of violence. And the third one is to strengthen collaboration across agencies, but also across countries. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Indeed, quite a broad issue here with a lot of interesting aspects. I will leave it open for questions now. And we can start actually with a question from Muscat in the Sultanate of Oman, where a senior journalist, Liju Sherian, asks the following question. Despite attempts by several global bodies to control violence against children, this has been going on unabated. During the recent migrant or refugee crisis, thousands of unaccompanied children have disappeared or died in Europe. What steps have the WCC taken to bring in pressure among world leaders through the United Nations bodies, or has the WCC Central Committee devised any plans on how to tackle this? I think I should address that question to Masimba.
Thank you very much. I will not be able to speak for the Central Committee, which is currently in session now, but what I know is that the World Council has, on various occasions, released statements to this effect. The World Council is seriously concerned about the plight of refugee children. In our plenary today, we heard what the German churches are doing to look after refugee children. And if you look at the World Council and its member churches, there are a lot of churches who are doing a lot in terms of ensuring that children are documented, children are not separated from their parents, and in the event that they are separated from their parents, they at least get good care. So the World Council of Churches has done that, but as a more long-term preventive measure, the principles and tools for child-friendly churches, as Caterina has rightly said, intends to also change the way people think and behave around children. So it may not be an immediate outcome of these principles, but we hope that as a long-term preventive measure, the principles and tools will go some way in changing behaviors.
Thank you. Sabine, you want to comment?
Yeah, just maybe thank you to this question from Muscat. I think a very interesting question. Two, I think, slight misconceptions in the question. I don't think that there's many bodies working on violence against children. There's the CRC, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which was launched 60 years ago. That covers all rights of children, but specifically on violence against children, this is actually the first time that governments are coming together and actors to address violence against children, thanks to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so all governments are signing on to that, and hopefully this will actually catalyze new action. And then the second one is the millions of unaccompanied and separated children across Europe. It's a difficult figure we have to work with because many of them are unaccompanied or separated because they want to, because they're adolescents, because they need to be reunified with their family. So it's not like they're 4-year-olds that have lost their parents. There's a mix in these big figures of children that are separated. And I think organizations like UNICEF, Save the Children, IRC, the churches are doing wonderful work at trying to reconnect families where they want to be reconnected.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the gathered world press here?
It seems to me to be a very wide scope that you're working on, and I realise that there must be certain goals that you can have on a very high level, but wouldn't it be very difficult to work with this in the same way in your different countries? I would say the situation is extremely different and needs to be met in different ways. How do you keep that together?
Perhaps, Caterina?
Maybe Masimba then will want to complement, but one thing I can say, he already referred to it in his introduction, is that these principles are really taught as, let's call them a kind of a manifesto, of something that if all churches did everything that is in these principles, and potentially let's bear in mind that these principles don't even address all the problems, they could be expanded. There are other problems that, as broad as they seem, there are other problems that those principles at this very moment don't even begin to tackle, right? But if all member churches really implemented everything that is in there, the world probably would be nearly perfect. Now, of course, that's a very ambitious vision, but the principles are meant to be used in the way that makes the most sense in the local context, which can mean, for example, not having to work on all three of them at the same time with the same standards. A church could well say, actually a church should have a look at the principles and say, okay, what is the reality in my country? What are the problems in my community? Perhaps the biggest problem in my community in this moment is violence and not so much the effects of climate change in this moment. Or let's not say that a problem is bigger than another, but simply for many reasons a church could simply choose to focus on one rather than the other to start with. And so let's not think of them as something compulsory that all churches must do all together at the same time and at the same level. Let's also remember that, of course, we're talking about local community, grassroots communities, so the reality of course, is going to be very different. And each church, some churches are going to be more equipped to start with one principle rather than the other, and some churches will probably do more progress in an area and maybe later focus on another area. So that's it's really meant to be applied at the local level, whatever the context is. So, for example, the tools, the fact that we are putting together a lot of tools who are very different from one another is exactly to serve that purpose, because we know that the needs are very different in each local context.
Thank you. Perhaps Masimba want to add something to that?
Just a couple of things. The first thing that we realize as the World Council is that there are fewer children in our churches. And the aim of the principles and tools is to reverse that trend. And most has been said in terms of how the principles and tools have been prepared so that they are easily adaptable to various contexts. And they also act as a resource for those churches who then want to start reversing this trend. The second aspect is that when we look at child-friendly churches, we are also looking at the present and the future, taking into consideration that more than half the world population now is under 35. And if you are not addressing the needs of at least more than half the population of the globe, then you have serious challenges of existence in the next few years.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have
Marion?
received one question from a journalist in Norway asking, particularly WCC, what's the reason behind the agreement between WCC and UNICEF?
Okay, let's repeat that so we get it also online here. What is the reason for the partnership between the WCC and UNICEF? And that was asked by a Norwegian journalist. Thank you. Anyone wants to reflect on that?
Okay. The World Council realizes that they have a constituency to serve. They also realize that they need expertise in some area. Now, when you look at UNICEF, they've been working with children for more than 60 years. And they have developed certain technical expertise that the World Council requires. So it was a good thing that UNICEF decided to partner the World Council, because we then tapped into their technical expertise, but also we then ensured that our constituency, who are the member churches, also got to benefit from the input of the theological foundation of the principles and the technical input from UNICEF. So the idea here is to work in collaboration, mainly focusing on the fact that we want a document that can be usable.
I would like to ask the same question as I asked in the previous press conference, but on a different subject. Now, there are a lot of efforts in place here, very ambitious programs to end violence against children and to provide a better life for children throughout the world. So when will we have achieved our goals? When will there be no violence against children? What do you say, Sabine?
In 15 years.
In 15 years? Oh, that's quite a bold commitment,
I think
isn't it?
others are much more skeptical and say it takes 100 years at least to see complete reductions of violence within a population. I think violence against children, if governments are really going to put actions in place, I think that's the aim for the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the target. I didn't set it, the government set them. So.
Okay, but I suppose that the preconditions are very different in different countries.
Absolutely.
But it sounds promising that 15 years is not so far away anyway, even if it's unacceptable that it exists all together, of course. So,
But could I also just say,
don't contradict me.
Violence will end as soon as we decide to take the decision to end violence. So it could even be earlier if us as families, us as churches, us as communities decide to take the steps to end violence. And you are aware that governments usually follow communities and families and churches. So if we start the change that we want to see, we could have it even earlier than 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we really believe that especially this audience, faith communities, have a special role to play in this. because of all I was saying at the beginning, the potential that they have to influence behavior, to promote positive values, and really, and also, of course, let's recognize it, the added value that faith communities have is their faith, their motivation. They do what they do for a very specific reason that goes beyond what other people could have as a motivation, and faith really can move mountains. So,
Faith can move mountains.
You know, one for the young ones, which I have heard recently. Faith is like Wi-Fi; it connects you to the invisible.
Well, I think that was a very good wrap-up of this press conference. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
And,
very much.
we will all try to keep in mind the importance of this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
you.